I thought my Uber driver had lost his mind when he suddenly pulled over on a dark highway and told me to get out immediately. His voice was urgent, panicked, and he kept looking in his rearview mirror like we were being followed. But when he explained why he'd stopped the car, when he told me what he'd noticed that I'd completely missed, I realized that this stranger who I'd initially feared might be trying to hurt me had actually just saved my life in ways I never could have imagined. It was a Friday night in late October, around 11:15 p.m. I'd been at my company's annual Halloween party at a fancy hotel in downtown Nashville. And I was exhausted from a long week of work plus hours of socializing with colleagues while wearing an uncomfortable Wonder Woman costume that had seemed like a good idea when I'd ordered it online. Work as a software engineer for a mid-sized tech company, and these corporate social events are always a delicate balance of trying to have fun while maintaining professional relationships and not embarrassing yourself in front of your boss. I'd managed to navigate the evening successfully, but I was ready to get home to my apartment in the Green Hills neighborhood, take off my costume, and collapse into bed. Most of my coworkers lived closer to downtown and were planning to continue the party at various bars on Broadway, but I lived about 20 minutes south of the city center and didn't feel like dealing with the crowds and noise of Nashville's famous honky-tonk district. Plus, I had plans to meet my sister for brunch the next morning, and I wanted to get a decent night's sleep. I said my goodbyes to colleagues and made my way through the hotel lobby to the exit, where I opened the Uber app and requested a ride home. The estimated wait time was 12 minutes, which was pretty good for a Friday night in Nashville when half the city seemed to be out partying. A driver named Marcus had accepted my ride. He was driving a silver Toyota Camry with excellent ratings of 4.9 stars. His profile photo showed a black man who appeared to be in his 40s with a warm smile and kind eyes. The photo gave me confidence that this would be a safe, professional ride home. When the Camry pulled up outside the hotel, I verified the license plate against the app. Tennessee plate HGF 2847. Everything matched perfectly. I climbed into the back seat, relieved to finally be heading home after a long day. "Good evening," Marcus said cheerfully, adjusting his rearview mirror to make eye contact. "How was your night? Looks like you were at some kind of costume party." "Yeah, company Halloween party," I replied, settling into the comfortable seat and buckling my seatbelt. "It was fun, but I'm definitely ready to get out of this costume." Marcus chuckled. "I bet. Wonder Woman's got a lot of gear going on there. Did you win any costume contests?" "No, but I didn't embarrass myself either, so I'm calling it a success," I said, appreciating his friendly but professional demeanor. As we pulled away from the hotel and headed south toward Green Hills, Marcus made pleasant conversation about the Halloween festivities happening around Nashville. He mentioned that he'd been driving for about 4 years and always enjoyed the costume parties because people were usually in good moods and the tips were better than average. "You must see some interesting costumes," I said. "Oh yeah, everything. From elaborate movie characters to people who clearly threw something together at the last minute," Marcus replied. "But I have to say, you committed to the Wonder Woman look. That's a pretty detailed costume." I felt comfortable and safe during our conversation. Marcus was professional, friendly, and seemed genuinely interested in making small talk without being intrusive or inappropriate. The car was clean and well maintained, with soft jazz playing at low volume, but as we made our way through downtown Nashville and got onto I-65 South, I noticed that Marcus kept checking his rearview mirror more frequently than seemed normal for just monitoring traffic. At first, I thought maybe he was just being a cautious driver, but his glances became more frequent and seemed more concerned. "Everything okay?" I asked, following his gaze to look behind us. "Probably nothing," Marcus said, but his tone had changed slightly. He sounded more focused, less relaxed. "Just keeping an eye on traffic." I looked out the back window but didn't see anything unusual. There were several cars behind us on the highway, which was normal for a Friday night. Nothing seemed particularly suspicious or noteworthy, but Marcus continued checking his mirrors obsessively, and I could see tension building in his shoulders. Something was clearly bothering him, but I couldn't figure out what. "Are you sure everything's okay?" I asked again. "There's a car that's been following us since we left the hotel," Marcus said quietly. "Dark sedan, probably a Charger or something similar. It's been matching our speed and staying about 3 cars back." I turned around again to look, and this time I noticed a dark car that did seem to be maintaining a consistent distance behind us. But I still wasn't sure how Marcus could tell it was following us rather than just happening to take the same route. Maybe they're just going the same direction? I suggested. Maybe, Marcus said, but he didn't sound convinced. Let me check something. Without signaling, Marcus suddenly changed lanes to the right. I watched as the dark sedan also changed lanes. A few seconds later, maintaining the same distance. A chill ran down my spine. That definitely seemed like more than coincidence. Okay, that's not normal, I admitted. No, it's not, Marcus agreed grimly. I'm going to try something else. Marcus took the next exit off the highway, even though it wasn't the correct exit. For my apartment. The dark sedan took the same exit. My heart started beating faster. Someone was definitely following us, but I had no idea why. I couldn't think of any reason someone would want to follow me. I wasn't involved in anything dangerous or controversial. I didn't have any enemies that I knew of, and I wasn't wealthy enough to be a kidnapping target. Why would someone be following us? I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. I don't know, Marcus said. But we need to figure out what's going on before we lead them to your apartment. That was a terrifying thought. If someone was following me for unknown reasons, the last thing I wanted was to show them where I lived. Marcus drove through a residential area, making several random turns. The dark sedan continued to follow us, always staying far enough back that we couldn't see the driver clearly but close enough that it was obvious they were tracking our movements. This is really happening, isn't it? I said, feeling scared and confused. Someone is actually following us. Yes, Marcus said firmly. And we need to do something about it. That's when Marcus made a decision that initially terrified me but ultimately saved my life. He pulled over suddenly on a quiet residential street and turned off the engine. Get out, he said urgently, turning around to face me. Get out of the car right now. My first instinct was panic. Why was my Uber driver telling me to get out of the car on a dark street in an unfamiliar neighborhood? Had he been working with whoever was following us? Was this some kind of trap? What? I said, my hand instinctively moving toward the door handle. Why? Because they're not following me, Marcus said quickly. They're following you. And if you stay in this car, they're going to keep following you wherever we go. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Someone was specifically tracking me, not just randomly following an Uber car. But Marcus was right. As long as I stayed in his vehicle, I was putting both of us in danger and making it easy for whoever was following us to track my movements. But where am I supposed to go? I asked frantically. There's a fire station about 2 blocks that way, Marcus said, pointing down the street. Run there as fast as you can. Tell them what's happening and ask them to call the police. I'm going to drive in the opposite direction and see if I can lead whoever is following us away from you. What if they follow me instead of you? Then you'll be running toward help instead of riding toward your apartment where they could corner you, Marcus said. Either way, splitting up gives us both a better chance. The logic made sense, but I was terrified to get out of the car and run through an unfamiliar neighborhood at midnight while someone was potentially trying to track me down. Are you sure about this? I asked. I'm sure, Marcus said. I've been driving for 4 years, and I've seen some weird stuff, but I've never had someone follow me like this. They want you, not me. And the longer you stay in this car, the more control they have over where you end up. I looked back and could see the dark sedan parked about half a block behind us with its lights off. Whoever was inside was clearly waiting to see what we would do next. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. Which way to the fire station? Straight down this street, then turn right at the 3rd intersection. You'll see the station on your left. It's a big brick building with red garage doors. Run fast and don't look back. I grabbed my purse and phone, opened the car door, and started running. Behind me, I heard Marcus start his engine and drive away in the opposite direction. Running in a Wonder Woman costume and heels through an unfamiliar neighborhood at midnight was surreal and terrifying. I could hear a car engine starting behind me, but I didn't turn around to see whether the sedan was following me or Marcus. I made it to the first intersection and turned right as Marcus had instructed. The street was well lit and residential, with small houses and mature trees, but it was completely deserted. My heels clicked loudly on the pavement, making me feel like I was announcing my location to anyone who might be listening. As I approached the second intersection, I risked a quick glance back and saw headlights behind me, moving slowly like someone was searching for something. My heart pounded as I realized the sedan had followed me instead of Marcus, but I could also see the fire station ahead, exactly where Marcus had said it would be. The building was illuminated and there were lights on inside, suggesting that firefighters were on duty. I ran up to the front door and pounded on it frantically. A firefighter opened the door almost immediately, a tall woman with short blonde hair who looked surprised to see someone in a superhero costume standing on their doorstep at midnight. "Help me," I gasped, out of breath from running. "Someone's been following me and my Uber driver told me to come here." "Come inside," the firefighter said immediately, stepping aside to let me enter. "What's going on?" I quickly explained the situation while the firefighter called the police. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived at the fire station, and I told the officers everything that had happened. Are you enjoying this story so far? Let me know in the comments what you think was really going on, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about strangers who turned out to be heroes. The police took my statement and asked for Marcus's information so they could follow up with him. They also asked if I had any idea who might have been following me or why. "I can't think of anyone," I said honestly. "I don't have any enemies that I know of, I'm not involved in anything dangerous, and I can't imagine why someone would want to track my movements." "Has anyone been showing unusual interest in you lately?" one of the officers asked. "Anyone at work, online, or in your personal life who might have developed an unhealthy obsession?" I thought about it carefully, but couldn't come up with anyone who fit that description. My life was pretty routine and drama-free: work, friends, family, hobbies. Nothing that would typically attract dangerous attention. "What about tonight specifically?" the other officer asked. "Did anyone at your company party seem overly interested in you or ask personal questions about where you live or your schedule?" That question made me pause. There had been someone at the party who had seemed a little too interested in my personal life. "Actually, yes," I said slowly. "There was a guy from another department who I'd never really talked to before, but he spent a lot of time talking to me tonight. He asked where I lived, what my weekend plans were, whether I lived alone." "What's his name?" "Derek something. I don't know his last name, but he works in the sales department. He seemed harmless at the time, just maybe a little awkward socially." The officers exchanged glances. "Can you describe him?" "Mid-30s, average height, dark hair. He was dressed as a vampire for the Halloween party. He seemed interested in me, but not in a way that felt threatening. Just persistent." "Did you tell him your address or give him any specific information about where you live?" "No, I just said I lived in Green Hills. I didn't give him my exact address or apartment number." But as I thought about it more, I realized that Derek had been asking very specific questions about my routine. What time I usually got home from work, whether I had roommates, what my weekend schedule looked like. At the time, I'd thought he was just trying to figure out if I was single and available for dating, but now those questions seemed more sinister. "We're going to need you to give us a detailed description of this Derek person and any information you have about him," one of the officers said. "We're also going to contact your company's HR department to get his full name and employee information." About an hour later, Marcus arrived at the fire station. He'd been driving around the city to make sure he wasn't being followed before coming to check on me. "Are you okay?" he asked as soon as he saw me. "I'm okay thanks to you," I said. "What happened?" "After I got out of the car, the sedan followed me for about 10 minutes, Marcus explained. "I drove in circles around downtown, and whoever was driving seemed to realize pretty quickly that you weren't in the car anymore. They gave up and disappeared." "So you were right, they were following me, not you." "Definitely. Once you were out of the car, they lost interest in me completely." The police officers interviewed Marcus about what he'd observed during the chase. His description of the sedan matched what I'd seen, and he'd managed to get a partial license plate number when the car had followed him through a well-lit intersection. "You did exactly the right thing," one of the officers told Marcus. "Recognizing that you were being followed and getting your passenger to safety probably prevented something much worse from happening." The next morning, the police called to tell me they'd identified Derek through my company's HR department. His full name was Derek Mitchell, and when they'd gone to his apartment to question him, they'd found evidence that confirmed their suspicions about his intentions. Derek's apartment contained dozens of photos of me, apparently taken without my knowledge over a period of several weeks. There were pictures of me leaving my apartment building, getting coffee near my office, shopping at the grocery store, and attending various social events around Nashville. Most disturbing were screenshots of my social media accounts, including posts that showed my location and daily activities. Derek had been studying my routine for weeks, building a detailed profile of my schedule and habits. He'd been planning to follow you home from the party and find out where you lived, Detective Rodriguez explained when she called with an update. If your Uber driver hadn't noticed the tail and gotten you to safety, Derek would have learned your exact address and probably escalated his stalking behavior. Derek was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment. The investigation revealed that he'd been fixated on me for months, ever since he'd seen me at a previous company event. He'd been gathering information about my life through social media and by observing me around the office, but the Halloween party had been his first opportunity to talk to me directly and gather more personal information. His plan was to follow you home, learn where you lived, and then begin a more intensive stalking campaign, Detective Rodriguez continued. Based on what we found in his apartment, he was prepared to escalate to breaking and entering or worse. The evidence against Derek was overwhelming, and he eventually pleaded guilty to multiple charges related to stalking and surveillance. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and 5 years of probation, with a permanent restraining order prohibiting him from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace. But the most important outcome was that I'd learned to trust my instincts and the instincts of people trying to help me. When Marcus first told me to get out of his car, my initial reaction had been fear and suspicion. But his quick thinking and willingness to put himself at risk to protect a stranger had literally saved my life. I've been thinking about that night a lot, Marcus told me when we met for coffee a few weeks later. I almost didn't say anything when I first noticed the car following us. I thought maybe I was being paranoid. What made you decide to do something about it? When the car followed us through those lane changes and off the highway, I knew for sure it wasn't coincidence, Marcus said. And then I started thinking about all the stories I'd heard about women being followed or stalked, and I realized I couldn't just ignore it and hope it would go away. I'm so grateful you trusted your instincts. I'm grateful you trusted me when I told you to get out of the car, Marcus replied. I know that must have been scary, having a stranger tell you to run into the night. Marcus was right. It had been terrifying to get out of his car on a dark street in an unfamiliar neighborhood. But his decision to separate us had been brilliant strategy that probably prevented Derek from learning where I lived and escalating his stalking behavior. The experience taught me several important lessons about personal safety and trusting both my own instincts and the instincts of people trying to help me. First, I learned to pay more attention to my surroundings and to trust my gut when something feels wrong. Derek had been watching me for weeks before the Halloween party, and while I'd noticed him around the office occasionally, I hadn't recognized the pattern or realized that his presence wasn't coincidental. Second, I learned to be more careful about what personal information I share, both online and in casual conversations. Derek had been able to build a detailed profile of my life by combining information from my social media accounts with observations of my daily routine. I've since made my social media accounts much more private and am more cautious about posting location information or details about my schedule. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the people who seem threatening are actually trying to help you, and sometimes the people who seem harmless are the ones you need to worry about. Derek had seemed like an awkward but harmless coworker who was trying to work up the courage to ask me out. Marcus had initially scared me when he told me to get out of his car in the middle of the night, but Derek turned out to be a dangerous stalker who had been planning to escalate his obsession into something much more threatening. And Marcus turned out to be a hero who risked his own safety to protect a stranger from a threat she didn't even know existed. The night that started with a fun Halloween party and should have ended with a routine ride home became a reminder that dangerous people don't always look dangerous, and that help sometimes comes from unexpected sources. Still think about what might have happened if Marcus hadn't been paying attention to his mirrors, or if he decided that the following car was probably just a coincidence. Derek would have learned where I lived, and based on what police found in his apartment, he was prepared to escalate his stalking behavior in ways that could have put me in serious physical danger. Instead, Marcus's quick thinking and willingness to take action protected me from a threat I didn't even know existed. His decision to tell me to get out of his car and run to safety seemed crazy in the moment, but it was exactly the right move to disrupt Derek's plan and get me to safety. I've stayed in touch with Marcus since that night, and he's become a good friend. He's told me that the experience made him more aware of passenger safety and more willing to trust his instincts when something seems wrong during a ride. I always thought my job was just to get people from point A to point B safely, he said. But that night taught me that sometimes protecting passengers means doing things that seem counterintuitive, like telling them to get out of the car. The rideshare companies have also implemented new safety features since stories like mine became more common. Drivers and passengers can now share trip details with emergency contacts more easily. There are panic buttons that connect directly to emergency services, and there are better reporting mechanisms for suspicious behavior, but technology can only do so much. The most important factor in my safety that night was having a driver who was paying attention to his surroundings, trusted his instincts when something seemed wrong, and was willing to take action to protect a stranger even when it meant putting himself at risk. Derek Mitchell served his full 2-year sentence and was released on probation with strict conditions. As part of his plea agreement, he was required to undergo psychological counseling and avoid all contact with me. I've never seen or heard from him since his arrest, and I hope that his time in prison and mandatory therapy helped him understand how harmful and illegal his behavior was, but I also know that stalkers often don't give up easily, and that Derek's obsession with me might not have ended just because he went to prison. I remain vigilant about my personal security and have taken steps to make it harder for anyone to track my movements or learn my routine, moved to a different apartment in a more secure building, changed my daily routes to work and other regular destinations, and am much more careful about my social media presence. I also carry pepper spray and have taken self-defense classes to feel more prepared if I ever encounter a threatening situation. Most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts and the instincts of people around me who might notice things I miss. The night Marcus told me to get out of his car, my first reaction was fear and suspicion. But his urgency and genuine concern for my safety were obvious, and I'm grateful that I listened to him despite my initial hesitation. Sometimes help comes from unexpected sources, and sometimes the people who seem like they're putting you in danger are actually the ones saving you from it. The Uber driver who told me to get out of his car on a dark street seemed like a threat in the moment, but he turned out to be the hero who recognized danger I couldn't see and took action to protect me from it. Your safety is more important than politeness, more important than not wanting to seem paranoid, and more important than not wanting to inconvenience someone who's trying to help you. When someone you trust tells you to run, sometimes the best thing you can do is trust them and run. Marcus saved my life that night by noticing what I'd missed, trusting his instincts about what was happening, and having the courage to take action even when it meant doing something that seemed crazy. The man I initially feared when he told me to get out of his car turned out to be exactly the person I needed to keep me safe. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is trust the people who are trying to help you, even when their help comes in a form you don't expect. And sometimes getting out of the car is exactly what you need to do to stay alive.